When it comes to backing the Contras, no one does it with as much enthusiasm as Miami's Cuban-American community.
The Cuban-American community has been of immense help to us. We are very grateful to them.
In fact, their alignment with Nicaraguan rebels goes well beyond symbolism. They stage fundraisers like this radio marathon. Doctors travel south to treat the wounded at makeshift hospitals. They train Contras at camps in Miami. And just last year, the Bay of Pigs Veterans Organization, Brigade 2506, made official its long-standing affiliation with the Contra's Southern Front in Costa Rica. The brigade has even sent soldiers to the front line.
More than 10 and less than 50.
The efforts have not gone unnoticed by President Reagan, who has identified with the Contra's struggle to the point of one saying,
"So it makes me a Contra, too."
Jose Cotin is a former Miami gun shop owner in jail awaiting trial on illegal weapons charges. He co-founded another Cuban-American organization that also supports the Contras. He was the Miami contact for Tom Posey's CMA, an Alabama-based mercenary group directly involved in the Contra struggle.
Our goal was to have a Cuban army, a Cuban representation in the war.
But the Contra's Northern Army Chief, FDN Director Adolfo Calero, turned down his offer of soldiers, preferring only Nicaraguans among his troops.
They didn't want our physical participation in the war. All they want is supplies.
Cotin, a gun dealer with international connections, says he never sent guns from U.S. territory, but he does admit he was negotiating a gun deal for the Contras days before he was arrested.
We had only ordered about, there were 20 AK-47s and 20 AR-15s. The people that would purchase them, then they were going to go to Central America. We had intention of buying an airplane, and they would probably leave on an airplane.
Unlike Brigade 2506, Cotin did not want to align his group with the Contra's Southern Front. The reason, its leaders and drugs. He names Rene Corvo, the brigade's official delegate to the region, Felipe Vidal, and others.
That's why I didn't want to participate. When you are in a political movement, a drug participating with drugs will discredit the movement.
According to investigators for a Senate Select Committee, both Rene Corvo and Felipe Vidal have been in charge of the Guns for Drugs refueling operation at airstrips on northern Costa Rican farms under the supervision of CIA-linked American rancher John Hull.
We have an alliance with a guy named by the name of Frank Chanes.
Chanes is the owner of Ocean Hunter, Inc. in Miami. Participants say he stored guns in his home that were sent to the Contras.
And Francisco Chanes had with a guy by the name, last name is Nunez. Was some kind of in some shrimp business. It was claimed that some drugs were shipped out from Costa Rica in containers with shrimps to Miami, and also in private planes.
Cotin says Chanes gave Corvo large amounts of money for the Contras. Corvo has not been available for comment.
I think it was just like a cover front.
Ocean Hunter's partner in Costa Rica is Moises Nunez. Government sources say DEA is looking at Chanes, Nunez, and their businesses, but the Federal Drug Administration refuses any comment. Their shrimp business, called Frigoríficos de Punta Arenas, is named in an internal General Accounting Office report as having received approximately $238,000 from the State Department's National Humanitarian Assistance Office. NHAO's former director, Ambassador Robert Dumling, citing security reasons, refuses to say why a shrimp business was getting humanitarian aid earmarked for the Contras. Corvo's associate, Felipe Vidal, a man with a record of drug charges in Miami, was the man who chose Frigoríficos' Miami bank account for the funneling of NHAO funds destined to a group of Southern Front rebels. NSC consultant Rob Owen, who used to work for NHAO, supervised this group's account, according to government sources. He was the one who reportedly put Vidal in charge of their funding. Earlier, Owen had been Oliver North's liaison to the Contras. Brigade 2506 Director Perez Franco says his organization is not involved in drugs.
This is against the law, this is against our principles, and we are against that.
However, even Secretary of State George Shultz has acknowledged the problem exists.
I believe whatever problem there is quite under control.
Tomorrow, a drug kingpin and his pilot talk about their guns for drugs missions in the Contra supply network. With an I-Team report, Susan Candiotti, Channel 10 Eyewitness News. Meet George Morales, a convicted drug smuggler who claims he was part of a secret South Florida network, flying guns and hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash to the Contras in Costa Rica.
The CIA asked me, the Contra leader asked me to do it, and I did it.
Morales says his main contact among the Contras was Adolfo Chamorro. Chamorro used to be right-hand man to former Contra leader Eden Pastora and commanded his own Contra group called BOS, based in northern Costa Rica. Morales, who used to own an Opa-locka airport brokerage firm called Aviation Activities, bought a Titan 404 plane for Chamorro that was used on at least a dozen guns for drugs missions. Eyewitness News has interviewed a mechanic and radio technician who worked on the plane and confirmed that, in fact, the plane flew guns for drugs exchanges. Eyewitness News has obtained these FAA papers documenting the sale of the Titan 404 plane to Adolfo Chamorro in the summer of 1984. Here is Chamorro's signature, and here is the name of the company, Cultivos Experimentales, a front corporation for the Contras, listing addresses in Miami and Costa Rica. Chamorro is named as its vice president. Eyewitness News has tried to reach Chamorro several times. He has not returned any of our calls. George Morales hired several pilots to fly Contra missions, like Gerardo Duran, currently jailed in Costa Rica, Marcos Aguado, a Contra pilot, and Gary Betzner.
Don't worry, I said, everything's under control. I said, I'm working with the CIA. I said, yeah, sure, yeah.
Betzner is also a convicted drug smuggler, and like Morales, doing time at a federal prison in Miami. In all, Betzner says, he smuggled 1,000 kilos of cocaine on the secret missions, one of them on the Chamorro plane. Betzner says one Guns for Drugs mission occurred in July 1984, when he flew the Titan 404 carrying guns, mortars, and C4 explosives from Fort Lauderdale International Airport to an airstrip on CIA-linked John Hull's ranch in northern Costa Rica. Hull is there when Betzner lands. After unloading the guns, a truck pulls up with a return load, 500 keys of cocaine. Betzner flies back to Lakeland, Florida, and has a driver deliver the coke to Morales in Miami. On other trips, Betzner claims he flew a C-47 from Opa-locka to Boca Chica Naval Air Station in the Keys, where he picked up a load of mines that he delivered to Ilopango Air Base in El Salvador. On that occasion at Ilopango, Betzner says he ran into Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North and DEA informant Barry Seal, who was murdered last year. Congressional investigators are looking into the claims, including an attorney working with Massachusetts Senator John Kerry.
It is, again, a marriage of convenience that you have drug smugglers utilizing Contra airstrips and Contra intelligence in order to break through United States airspace.
Tomorrow, more secret missions, taking guns and foreign mercenaries from Miami to the Contra's southern front. With an I-Team report, Susan Candiotti, Channel 10 Eyewitness News. Tonight we're going to tell you about two flights that took secret arms shipments from South Florida to the Contra's southern front in Costa Rica, part of the secret Contra supply network that sometimes flew guns in exchange for drugs. In both cases, the same plane, a cargo plane like this one rented from Florida Air Transport in Fort Lauderdale, was used. The flights took place on March 6th and June 16th, 1985. In both cases, the flight plans were the same. Fort Lauderdale to Ilopango Air Force Base in El Salvador. The arms then transferred to Costa Rica. In both cases, the planes flew weapons and mercenaries recruited in South Florida, in apparent violation of United States law. And in both cases, the planes were rented by this man, Rene Corvo, who belongs to Brigade 2506, the Bay of Pigs Veterans Organization. Corvo is the man who represents the brigade at the Contra's southern front in Costa Rica. Eyewitness News has obtained these documents that show the planes were paid for in cash by Rene Corvo at a cost of $8,000 each. Eyewitness News has also interviewed 3 people who say the deliveries from Fort Lauderdale to Costa Rica occurred. 5 people were on the first flight. They were 2 pilots, a self-described journalist, a mercenary, and Rene Corvo. Jesus Garcia, a former corrections officer, claims he helped load the arms on the March 6th flight.
M60 machine guns, motor tubes, 50 caliber, small cannon, a lot of ammo, clothing, supplies, boots.
The mercenary was Stephen Carr. Carr is dead of a drug overdose, but before his death, he told congressional investigators that Garcia is telling the truth.
He corroborated the fact that indeed, yes, there was this van full of weapons. Yes, he met Mr. Garcia at this home in South Miami. Yes, he drove this van full of weapons to Fort Lauderdale Airport. And yes, indeed, he loaded those weapons, including a 14-foot cannon, onto a chartered plane.
Their story is further backed up by another mercenary who met the flight in Costa Rica. His name is Peter Glibbery. He too has told investigators about the weapons shipment, corroborating Garcia's story.
He had flown down to Costa Rica with Mr. John Hull. He arrived in Costa Rica and he traveled to the northern Nicaraguan border, northern Costa Rica and Nicaraguan border. At the border, he met those light aircraft flying in with weapons. He and Mr. Hull saw the flights come in and helped unload them.
The second